Welcome back to a single malt review. We previously looked at the Oloroso Sherry cask edition of Glenlivet's Nadurra. Today we're on to another Glenlivet, only a bit more on the beaten track.
Yes, I thought I'd bring this one out to serve as something of a interesting comparison with the Nadurra, which if you are following along, which I hope you are, you will have seen that video some time ago because it would have been the last one that went up. And there's something very weird went with my production. But the comparison I want to make here is that we are dealing with, obviously, both Glenlivet whiskey, and we're dealing with bottles that are ostensibly, depending on where you're shopping and what's on special, the same price. But beyond that, they are very, very, very different whiskey. And I like one of them more, and Dave might have based on our previous scores, Dave might have the opposite reaction, but we'll just have to see, because they're both Glenlivets, but they could not be much more different apart. Although that said, they do have one similarity. They are both Glenlivets that represent a lot more sherry maturation than your standard. The Nadurra obviously was 100%, so that's got it right there. But the 18 has conspicuously more sherry character than especially the 12 and certainly the Founder's Reserve.
So it's still bourbon dominant, but not as dominant as those younger versions. I
don't know what the ratio is, but it follows very much the same path of, well, many whiskies really, but in terms of this, it's sort of, it's very closely proximate, and main competitor, the indomitable Glenfiddich distillery, they really only give you a flash of the sherry once you go up to 18, and I think it does wonders for the actually interesting profile of their whiskey. But taxonomic differences on this one, we couldn't really get to the bottom of whether the Nadurra was coloured or not, but given how conspicuously it mentioned that it was unchill filtered, I reckon it might have been, just had a little bit of colour put in there to regulate things. This one is very, very, should say, traditionally presented in terms of no attempt made to suggest that this is anything other than coloured and chill filtered. Chill filtered, certainly.
Although curiously, the two are virtually the same colour. We've held bottles side by side and nearly identical.
So read into that what you will, I suppose. This one is 43% by volume.
As opposed to the weapons grade 60 on
so
Nadurra.
You could say, if you're into your whiskey value, that right off the bat, Nadurra is better buying because you are getting more literally 20% more whiskey in there. So you just imagine the bottle getting 20% larger, and that's I think that's how that maths works. So you are getting more sort of alcoholic bang for your buck with the Nadurra, but I still think this one has its merits, as I will attempt to describe.
Well, mine is balking the idea of an 18-year-old version of the Nadurra. That would be
a hell of a thing, but I forgot to give my conspiracy theory of why they make the Nadurra, but I might get into it. This time. This one, like many 18-year-olds, this is where I think the distillery really starts getting interesting. It goes from like a good solid whiskey at 12 years old to something way less forgettable at 18. So we'll approach it quite gently because it's not going to blow us away like the Nadurra was. This one should be perfectly safe. And comparatively, extremely delicate. It's a very sort of sweet, quite a floral nose in comparison there.
Mild and, I'd say floral and aromatic. There's notes of sorbet, marmalade, things which are easy on the tongue and on the nose.
There's even some sort of violets in here. There's quite a lot of interesting, almost slightly Highlandy floral characters coming out of here.
Bit of butterscotch, some Werther's
lots
originals.
of butterscotch, lots of Werther's in there, if you get those in the States, I don't know, or whatever your butterscotch alternative is there to the old indomitable Werther's. There
was a part of me which has a BA in German and insists that it should be a Werther's original, but we in the English-speaking world have always been taught to call it Werther's. Nonetheless.
Were they a butterscotch of German origin originally?
Yes.
You learn something every day. This one, heaps and heaps of honey as well, and I think that's probably coming through from the bourbon more than anything else. And it's a really to me, the bourbon and the sherry is really, really working in tandem with each other, which means on the one hand you lose some of the real subtle notes. So for in this case, a lot of the coconut you might get out of a bourbon whiskey, which was quite evident on the Founder's Reserve especially, that's sort of gone here, either by terms of age or just the stronger sherry influence, that's the coconut out of there. No more coconut.
That's the thing, when you start combining cask types, you lose some of the individual characters of the separate casks, but you get a good kind of a polyphony of characters and flavours harmonising, hopefully blending together nicely.
And whereas the Nadurra was quite creamy, this one is quite juicy. It's like a whiskey that flows faster across the nasal passages here, and I think even more so on the palate.
It is quite nectary.
So without further ado there, we'll give a little look at the palate.
Ooh.
And it's flowing. Flowing is the term I give to this. It's sort of just incredible, dripping, mouth-wateringly sweet honey nectar, as you said, like a really, really light, sweet, runny honey kind of a thing.
It's kind of a thin and light texture, but not watery or insipid. By that I mean it kind of flows quickly and readily across your palate. It doesn't sort of stick like a thick, sugary, gooey mess like the Nadurra did.
Though it's quite sweet, it is tremendously, tremendously fresh.
Yeah.
There's this amazing freshness to it. This incredible freshness that whiskies that, though are old, because this one is obviously 18 as a minimum, and there will be whiskies probably up to maybe even a few older than 21, 22 in here as top dressing, just to sort of tweak it around, make it taste as good as it can. And you get this, especially I think it's the bourbon coming through. Bourbon, as it sort of approaches its 20s, it can have this, just when you think it starts to sort of calm down, maybe even get a little bit stuffy, a little bit sort of old tasting, you just get this wonderful fruity vibrancy coming in. And sherry doesn't quite do that as much. Sherry ages a bit more linearly, and so this one, 18 though it is, it tastes very, very youthful, very youthful and
there
vibrant.
is an effervescent, sherbety fizziness to this, which puts me in mind of some of the very young bourbon matured whiskies we've tried over the last year. And it's really quite something.
Though there's a lot of dominance in there from certain characteristics. There is oodles and oodles of different flavours in here. There's sort of roasted nuts. Normally you get them as honey nuts, but these are just roasted nuts, sort of roasted hazelnut, quite a bit of almond, sort of slightly darker tasting, more full-bodied tasting nuts. There's a little walnut in there
I'm
as
getting
well.
some, caramel as well. Caramel and walnuts are coming very strongly for me.
I said there was a slightly bitter element from the sherry wood in the Nadurra, and that's present here as well, but in much, much less
It's really minimal.
quantity.
I was barely aware of it till you mentioned it.
And it's kind of serves a purpose, because I think without that there to temper the sweetness, this would be almost a bit sickly sweet in terms of whiskey. It is so sort of nectar sweet that I think that in addition to the acid, which does a great deal as well, it's got a good acid mouth-watering quality, that slight little thread of bitterness, almost like a black tea bitterness coming in from usually I think the sherry wood is what we get that one from, that kind of dries the palate up a wee bit, especially on the end, and it stops it getting too sugary.
Yeah,
which
no one
these
wants a
older ones
bull in a
can
candy
do.
shop, and this is balanced out nicely to subdue that just enough.
So this one, it can handle water, but it only wants just a wee
I'm going to be very sparse. This is such a good whiskey, right as it is, that I don't want to hinder it at all.
So the water, it doesn't do anything you wouldn't expect. The water sort of freshens it up, but it freshens up an already fresh, bouncy, fruity whiskey, and I think it actually helps quite a lot.
That has brought out some of the much more subtle fruity aromas. We're getting strawberry jam now, apricots, some summery fruits which I would not expected and just simply wasn't aware of before.
That turns the dial even fresher, and it is just incredibly fresh and sort of vibrant and really, really fruity. It sort of brings it, for me, in terms of its flavour profile, down from the Highlands a wee bit and puts it squarely back in Speyside, because now it's just juicy fruits all over the place. Red apple, there's some extremely ripe, sort of almost going a bit soft pear, there's citrus, there's almost all the juicy things in the world, and I think it's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, that's very heavy on the lemon and lime on the palate now. Just a hint of that strawberry, maybe a little cherry.
It's incredibly good. It's really horribly moreish and drinkable as well. It's just, it goes down so easy. It's going to be quite a difficult thing as the level in the bottle dictates as well. I've been having real trouble not drinking all of that one before we were able to get Dave around for the review. Yeah, and I think it's a whiskey that almost everyone will enjoy as well. I think it's really good.
Yep.
And my score, I hope, reflects that. I think this one has gone up into 91 territory for me, and that's a full 10 points higher than the Nadurra. So I'll be interested to see how your score shifts.
You were thinking I was going to favour the Nadurra.
Well, I thought
for
there was a
sherry.
possibility there, because you're such a, as you say, on or maybe perpetually falling off the sherry matured whiskey wagon. Cannot stay away. I thought maybe the sheer force of sherryness might have swung you, but
and
so
while it
I'm
was
quite
a real exponent of the style, this one, because of extra age and just the careful selection, the balancing of flavours here, this elevates it higher, up to a 90 for me.
Okay, well they're definitive. I think two whiskies, same price, very different presentation. I think the 18 years has it. I think one, it depends what you're after, of course. It's all very personal. Whether you like massive blow your head off whiskies, I think the Nadurra probably has a fan base there. But I guess one whiskey is selling the dream, which is the Nadurra, and one is selling a guarantee, which is the age statement 18. And I think potentially different audiences will flock to those. But it's quite informative, I think, to try those side by side, because this I think it's a little bit of evidence in favour of age statements, because paying the same amount, the dream and the promise, the promise really does come through. It tastes like everything an 18-year-old whiskey should, and it does not disappoint in any way. We'll see how the Nadurra develops, and we'll probably get a hold of a standard one, which is their bourbon matured ones, and they, I think, tend to be a little more reliable than young, very young sherry matured whiskey. I always have a bit of a bugbear about very young sherry matured whiskey. I think sherry needs just a little bit more time, but bourbon, that can be fully mature at 8 years old. And I think looking between 6 and 8, that's probably just about where you'd pin the tail on the Nadurra donkey, were you to take a stab at its age. But anyway, this was the 18, and this is a very sound recommendation. Not only is it a really good scoring 18, it's one that you can get anywhere in the world really easily, and for a pretty reasonable price as well. And it'll do you an extra 3% ABV than its closest competitor, the also very available Glenlivet 18. So it's got that over it anyway. At any rate, that was a pair of Glenlivets, always a very strong hand, and this has been the Single Malt Review. We'll get back on... We'll diversify from here a little bit. It's been a wee while since we've done a bourbon, and I feel people are getting restless over in the States without another one of those reviews. So we'll hit one of those, and then we've got some rums in the pipe as well, one of which I think you'll find quite hilarious. So look forward to that, and we'll be right back. Sláinte.